Next year, where are you going to be operating from?
Oh, next year we'll be operating from here, that's for certain, sure. I know there's been speculation about sale of the land here. No contract for sale has been made, and we are not obligated to anybody at the moment. And even if we did sell, the kind of people who might be interested in this place would be retail developers. Planning consent for something like that takes a long time, a minimum of 2 years. So for this coming season and next year, at a minimum, we will be operating from here. Subject, that is, to the financial impact that there are on the business for things like the price of fuel, dollar exchange rate, availability of spares and that sort of stuff. But from my gut feeling is that there will be no change for at least 2 years.
Okay, and are you looking at sites that could be the future site if some deal with a retailer comes off for this particular site here, for instance?
Oh, absolutely. We have to cover that issue, because if a miracle happened and somebody got a deal through in no time flat, then we would have to have a contingency plan. And for us, there are two ways of looking at it. One, we move straight to Land's End, which we've discussed through the steamship company, and we've got a plan for doing that. The other way is to move to Newquay and operate the service from there. Or there's a mix and match arrangement which says we move to Newquay, but we stage through Land's End on the way to the islands. Now, all those are sort of theoretical points at the moment, because we haven't firmed anything up, because there is nothing moving here which makes us do that.
But have you looked at the site that would be your preference, your preferential site out of those two you've cited?
Well, probably Land's End from the operational point of view, but on the other hand, you've got to think about the customer. Where does the customer want to fly from? Does he want to drive or past here, or catch a bus from the train station up to Land's End, or would he rather make his journey to Newquay and get on the helicopter from there? And we don't know, really, and we haven't tested that market yet.
There'd be no issue with payloads from Newquay?
Well, you get over that payload issue by stopping off at Land's End for fuel.
Okay. Certainly in the islands, people, when the original idea of the St Just co-location with Skybus was mooted, people were concerned about that because of the cloud base and also the challenges sometimes in getting to St Just. Have you taken those views on board?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we were well aware of all those issues beforehand. But I'm one part of a big wheel, and if my Lords and Masters decide that this site at Penance is to be sold, I have then to find the best alternate site to operate from. There is no doubt that if you're running a helicopter service from here to the Isles of Scilly, Penance is the ideal place to start and finish. However, if that's not available, then you've got to look at next best opportunities, and Land's End and Newquay are just about equal between them, given, as you say, the payload issues about going from Newquay.
And suggestions about Hale, can you confirm or deny that you're looking at any sites around there?
We were offered a site in Hale some years ago when it looked like we were under threat for our hangar at Plymouth. And Penwith District Council, as was, had a view that it might want to do something with this site here and wanted to swap. But unfortunately, the site that I was shown over there all those years ago was totally unsuitable. And to be perfectly honest, we have not looked at anything in Hale or anywhere else. We've only looked at Land's End and Newquay.
How are relations with your competitor, Skybus, at the moment?
Well, we compete cat and dog for passengers, but on the other hand, we've got a symbiotic relationship because when they can't fly, like today, we move their passengers, and when we can't fly, our passengers go on the ferry. So we have to work together, because it's a joined-up solution to transport to the islands that we're trying to make. But I want more of his passengers, he wants more of mine.
So would that make any sort of co-location pretty much unworkable because of the commercial rivalry has been so strong?
No, we went into that before we discussed, or before we went public on the potential move to Land's End back in, I think it was December 2008. We did it on the basis that if there was any hint that one party would try to outdo the other, the system would never work. And the market has a certain number of passengers which need to get between the mainland and the Isles of Scilly, and the helicopter, the aeroplane and the boat all play their part.
There is a rumour that you have looked at a fixed-wing service operating the routes to the islands. Have you done that?
Yeah, we looked at a fixed-wing operation when first we thought that the land here might be sold. And we took the view that competing head-to-head with Skybus with the same equipment wouldn't work. We'd just be in a margin stressing arrangement, and that wouldn't work for either party. So we gave up on that idea 18 months ago.
Now, your colleagues from Sikorsky have spoken about this is a most successful passenger route that's not subsidised. It's an issue I know a lot of people talk about, the notion of parity with the Scottish Islands with a grant subsidy route, and I know we've talked about this at length before. Has that moved in any way? Have you got anywhere nearer to the idea of having some element of lifeline service, albeit having a competitor on the route?
Having a competitor on the route rules out any qualification for what is referred to as a public service obligation, which is what the Scottish Isles benefit from. It's been demonstrated by the various transport operators up there that it cannot be made to work as a commercial concern, even if you've got a monopoly on the route without public funding. Here, we can argue that we are profitable on the route, otherwise we wouldn't do it in competition with others. And it's kind of different in that there is a ferry route and an aeroplane route and a helicopter route, all of which have got different attractions, and all of which can only presume that Steamship Company is profitable. We certainly are in the margins, and only because we can dilute our overhead here on other contracts in other places. If we tried to do this on our own, it would never work. And that might be the way that a public service obligation might be achievable. But right now, because there's competition, it's ruled out.
And you mentioned you're profitable on the route. Obviously people will hear that and say, well, if you're profitable, can we have fares reduced a little bit? What would you say to that argument?
Then you go into negative.
So it's break-even profitable?
Absolutely, yeah. The problem is that we're competing on the aviation route with an operator who flies aeroplanes. Aeroplanes are much cheaper to operate than helicopters because they've got less moving parts. And to some extent, if I was operating a fixed wing against a helicopter, I would be able to set my margins much higher because I know that all I need to do is be £10 a ticket cheaper than the helicopter, and people might come to me. If we start dropping our prices, Skybus will drop theirs, and we'll still be in the same situation.
Have you got a preferential outcome as what may happen in relation to the route partnership tender for the boat? Some would say it could be in your interest that Steamship Company didn't get it, so there might not be the fixed wing service.
There is potential for that to happen. I think it's unlikely. We were part of the route partnership initially, as were the Steamship Company. When it became clear how the eventual outcome was going to be determined, i.e. by tender of the operatorship of the service, then we and Steamship Company were eliminated, principally because both of us were going to be party to commercial information. And we did, in fact, join up with another operator to consider operating the ferry service because we've got the skills and knowledge about how to deal with passengers and reservations, etc. But that fell away. I think that it might be possible to harmonise the fixed wing and the helicopter together as one company, but we haven't looked at that.